For much of the 20th century, asbestos was hailed as a miracle mineral fireproof, durable, and versatile. It was woven into insulation, brake pads, roofing materials, cement, and even household products. Its widespread use made it a cornerstone of industrial growth and post-war construction. But behind its commercial success lay a lethal truth. Asbestos exposure causes deadly diseases, including mesothelioma, lung cancer, and the companies that mined, manufactured, and marketed asbestos knew this for decades. What followed was one of the most egregious corporate cover-ups in modern history, a campaign of deception, suppression, and intimidation that sacrificed public health for profit. The dangers of asbestos were not unknown in the early days of its industrial use. As early as the 1920s, medical journals in the United States, Canada, and Europe published articles linking asbestos exposure to respiratory illness. By the 1930s, scientists had established a clear connection between asbestos and lung cancer, and were beginning to understand the fatal nature of mesothelioma, a rare cancer almost exclusively caused by asbestos fibers too. Internal documents from major asbestos companies, later revealed in court, showed that executives were aware of these findings. Instead of warning workers or the public, they chose to bury the evidence. One of the most damning examples came from the files of Johns Manville, the largest asbestos manufacturer in the United States. In the 1940s, company executives were presented with medical reports showing that employees had developed a debilitating lung disease caused by inhaling asbestos fibers. Rather than disclose the findings, they instructed managers not to inform workers. In a deposition, decades later, a former employee recalled asking Johns Manville president Lewis Brown whether the company would let workers continue until they dropped dead. Brown's reply: "Yes. We save a lot of money that way." 3. This attitude was not isolated. Across the industry, companies suppressed research, manipulated trade publications, and pressured scientists to avoid publishing findings that linked asbestos to disease. In some cases, they funded studies with the explicit goal of discrediting earlier research. Editors of asbestos trade magazines were instructed to eliminate the word cancer from their publications. Workers who showed signs of illness were denied access to their own medical records, and some were fired to prevent them from filing claims. The industry's influence extended into the political realm. Asbestos manufacturers lobbied aggressively against regulations that would limit exposure or require warning labels. They cultivated relationships with lawmakers, funded industry-friendly research, and mounted public relations campaigns to reassure consumers. Regulatory agencies, under pressure from industry, delayed action for years. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, and the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, faced intense resistance when they attempted to impose stricter standards in the 1970s. It wasn't until thousands of workers began filing lawsuits that the truth began to surface. Litigation against asbestos companies uncovered a trove of internal documents, memos, and correspondence that revealed the extent of the cover-up. These records showed that executives had known about the risks for decades, had taken steps to conceal them, and had failed to implement even basic safety measures. The lawsuits also exposed the industry's efforts to intimidate whistleblowers and silence critics. By the late 1970s, the tide had turned. Courts began awarding substantial damages to victims, and public awareness of asbestos-related diseases grew. The revelations led to a wave of regulatory reforms, including bans on certain asbestos products and stricter workplace safety standards. But for many, the damage was already done. Tens of thousands of workers had been exposed without protection, and the latency period of asbestos-related diseases meant that new cases continued to emerge decades after exposure. The legacy of the asbestos industry cover-up is staggering. Mesothelioma, though rare, remains a deadly diagnosis with no known cure. Asbestosis and lung cancer caused by asbestos exposure continue to claim lives. The financial cost of litigation and medical care has reached billions, and the emotional toll on families is incalculable. The industry's deliberate deception not only endangered workers, it undermined public trust in corporate accountability and regulatory oversight. Today, asbestos is banned or heavily restricted in many countries, but it is still used in some parts of the world. The lessons of the cover-up remain urgent. They highlight the importance of transparency in scientific research, the need for independent regulation, and the dangers of allowing profit to override public health. They also serve as a reminder that the truth, no matter how long suppressed, has a way of emerging and that justice, though delayed, can still be pursued. The asbestos industry's campaign of denial was not just a failure of ethics, it was a calculated betrayal. It prioritized corporate gain over human life, and it did so with full knowledge of the consequences. The documents unearthed in courtrooms across the country tell a story not just of negligence, but of intent. They show that the industry didn't just ignore the warnings, it silenced them. And in doing so, it condemned thousands to suffering and death. The cover-up is now part of the historical record, a case study in corporate but its implications go beyond asbestos. It raises questions about how industries respond to emerging health risks, how governments regulate powerful interests, and how societies remember and reckon with harm. The asbestos story is not just about what happened, it's about what was hidden and what it took to bring it to light. It's a story of silence, resistance, and ultimately, exposure. And it's one we cannot afford to forget.